Hello everyone, Mike Rempel from Excel Bytes with today's Excel Bytes tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at tables and all the advantages of using tables in Excel. And hopefully when you're done watching this video, you're going to be as excited about using tables as I am. But before we jump into that, please take a minute to subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure you hit the bell icon so you will get a notice whenever I put out a new video. So now let's check out today's topic. So here I have a standard data range on my worksheet called Tables and also on the worksheet called Data Range. They're both identical. But what I've listed on the Tables worksheet is a list of all the benefits, 10 different benefits that we're going to take a look at and go through so you can see several of the reasons why you should be using tables. Now the first thing, in order to convert your data range to a table, is using the keyboard shortcut Control-T. So all you need to do is click anywhere in your data, as long as your data doesn't have any blank rows or blank columns. Then just use the keyboard shortcut Control-T and a box will pop up identifying your range and if your table has headers or not. Now notice if I scroll down, Excel has identified the whole area. Now I have another line of data here, and that's why I said make sure there's no blank rows, because it will stop wherever it sees a blank row or column. But this is exactly what I wanted it to be, so I'll click OK, and now Excel has converted my data range to a table. Now the first item I have here is the style variety. When I click in the table, notice a table design item in my ribbon pops up. And in table styles, there is a whole slew of styles that you can choose from to change the look of your table. Even including if you just want to have no style, it can still be considered a table. It just will look like a normal data range. I'm going to go back and convert it to the default that I have, which is this colored blue. The next item is banding. If you notice in the table style options, one of the items here is banded rows. If I uncheck that, the banding goes away, but by checking it, it makes it easier to follow rows of data across my range in order to see easily what the data is for that line. Also with filters, notice it automatically turned on filters, but I could turn those off and on, again, with checking or unchecking the box in the table styles option. You can also add a total row. So if I go down to the bottom here and I click in my table, table design, and select total row, it adds a total row to the bottom, and it will take the last column and provide one of the categories, normally sum if it's values, or if it's text it'll do a count. But you can choose any one of these options to include in your total row. So for example, for revenue, if I want the average for the items in that and the price per, maybe I want the sum, and under quantity maybe I want the count, I can see those items and I can change those whenever I want. Now I'm going to go ahead and uncheck total row, and that data goes away. If I add a new row, notice that if I take this data here, I'll copy it and I'll just set it on the next row of the data, Control V. Notice it'll format it just like the rest of the data. And another option here is, even though I didn't copy the formula that I had in the revenue column, Excel will automatically copy down any formulas that you have from the data above into that new row of data that you add. I'm going to go ahead and undo that row just to keep the data the way we originally had it. So that covers auto formats and autofill formulas. Notice also that if I scroll my data, it just scrolls like any other data range would be. But if I've clicked into my table and I scroll, notice the column letters A, B, C, D, etc. have been replaced by my header row. So even without using freeze panes, I can see what the column header is even when I've scrolled down in a larger database or a larger table range. Slicers is another great option that you can have with tables. If I go to my Table Design tab, there is an option to insert a slicer. And these are basically different ways to filter your data very simply. So what I'm presented with is a list of all the headers I have for my table. So if I choose, for example, salesman, model, and region, and I say OK, Excel will give me 3 slicers of those items, and I can adjust the size of those. I can move them around. They're floating objects in Excel. And now when I have these available to me, I can choose to use these as my filtering. So I can turn off filters on my table here. And now if I want to see the data, for example, for Ed, I click on Ed and it will just show me Ed. If I want to see Ed and Chevy, now it's filtered down to Ed Chevy, and just for the South, I can get Ed Chevy just for the South. If I click on these multi-check boxes here, it allows me to choose multiple items to filter by. So now I'm looking at South for Chevys and Fords for Ed, Jack, and Tom. And to clear those, I just need to click on the red X that's in that funnel icon there, and I'm back to my full data. The last 2 benefits of using tables are auto-expanding ranges when adding rows or columns and logical formula format. So let's take a minute and create a formula using the data range and using the table and see how those differ. So I'm going to go over to my Formula tab, and let's say I want to use a SUMIFS of my data range to get the data for Fred in the South and for Chevy. I would type equals SUMIFS tab. My sum range, I would go over to my data range tab and select the revenue column, which is H2 to H10. My criteria range, I'm going to choose column B here, which is my salespeople, comma, and then I would go back to my Formula tab and click on cell K2. Now I want to know the region, so I have to go back to my data range and go to the regions, select that column, comma, go back to my Formula tab, click on K3, comma again, back to my data range for the model, select that, Control Shift down, comma, and go back to Formula, select Chevy, close my parentheses, and hit Enter, and I get the value that I wanted. But when I look at my formula, my data range, I know what worksheet the data is coming from, but what is H2 to H10, or B2 to B110, or D2 to D110, etc. I have to go back to my data range to understand what each of those columns is. And notice I had to go back and forth between worksheets in order to create those columns if I hadn't used named ranges. With a table, now if I go back to my table, click on it, and go to the table design, I can name my table anything I want. In this case, I'm going to call it sales. Now, when I go back to my Formula tab, if I want to do a SUMIFS equals SUMIFS, my sum range is the sales table. I put in a square bracket, and I can scroll down to revenue, hit tab, close my square bracket, and that's my sum range. My criteria range, I select my sales table, square bracket, and I can choose salesman, close that square bracket, comma. My criteria next will be K2, comma. Now my criteria range 2, again, I'll choose my sales table, square bracket. This one is going to be region, close my square bracket, comma, click on south, comma, and then my third criteria, my sales table, square bracket, I want this one to be model. I can scroll down to that, hit tab, square bracket, comma, and the criteria is K4. Close my parentheses, hit enter. I get the exact same value, but I can see exactly what my formula is doing. I'm taking the sales revenue, I'm using the salesman column as Fred, the region as South, and the model as Chevy, and I can understand my formulas much better. And the other benefit, as I indicated here about auto expanding the ranges, if I took that data that I had here and I added it to my table, so I'm just going to copy, go over to here, Control V, notice two things happened. One, it formatted it exactly as the rest of the table. Two, it auto-copied the formula in column H down. And three, it automatically adjusted the formula to include any additional rows that I add or delete any rows that I might delete. Now, if we did the same thing to the data range, I'll take my data here, copy it, and paste it right here. I have to copy that formula down to make sure it includes it, but going back to my formula here, it did not include it in my totals because I had defined the range only to row 110. And now I have to manually adjust my data ranges in my formula. And these are some of the great benefits of using tables. So I hope after viewing this, you get an idea of why you should be using tables in Excel. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so at any of the social networks noted below. Thanks a lot, have a great day, and happy Excelling.